comments have been outright cruel and mean, and it really is a manifestation of the lack of education. And so joining us today, we have on set Stephanie.
Hi.
Stephanie is a brave, strong, awesome, phenomenal mother who's going to give a bit of her story and a little bit of the insight into what she had to face. And then we're joined by Dr. Tracy Rogers. Tracy is the Director of Wholeness and Wellness Counseling, and she's going to help explain a little bit, give the actual information that is necessary for us to end the stigma, and because I think it is a bit of stigma, and we can't solve it until we end the stigma and really start to discuss it and really start to educate the wider public. Tracy, should I start with you?
You can start.
All right. Tell us about the Wholeness and Wellness Counseling. Tell us about your practice a little bit before we even go into, what is postpartum depression, etc.
So Wholeness and Wellness Counseling Service is a counseling agency that really focuses on helping people dealing with struggle. Like we struggle, all of us. And as human beings, we really wired for connection. And oftentimes, we find ourselves in the midst of a struggle and unable to reach out and ask for help and unable to connect. Connection is really part of our DNA. It helps our brain work, it helps our body work. And so wholeness and wellness is really an attempt for us to think about that the fact that we are whole persons, that we are emotional people, we have a spiritual self, we have a physical self. So it's really about asking us to focus on our mind, our body, and our emotions so that we can actively be working towards wellness. And I want to say that wellness is a practice. Yeah, it means it's something that we're always doing and we constantly have to be working on. It is not a point of arrival, it's not a destination. And life is a practice. So at Wholeness and Wellness Counseling, we focus on mindfulness, we have meditation and yoga in addition to our counseling practice. So we have our associates, psychologists, clinical social workers, psychotherapists, really diverse group of people, and our practice targets adolescents, men and women who are dealing with a range of struggles.
Something that you said really jumped out at me, and as I said, it's a lot about the stigma, right? This whole mental illness is a lot about stigma, and you spoke about mind, body, and soul. And I feel like in Trinidad, for sure, we've gotten the body. Okay, so if it's a physical illness, if there's a physical manifestation, we're okay to go to the doctor.
We're okay.
We're still a very spiritually led country. And so again, everyone's sort of like, okay, go to church, pray.
Right.
And we are able to still take care of the spiritual side. But when it comes to the mental side of things, I'm really not sure that as a country, we're there. We have not yet understood that it is mind, body, and soul. And so until we get to the health must be, yes, we must be spiritually strong. Yes, we must be physically strong. But we must also take care of our mental health. And going to see psychologists and going to see counselors and these kinds of things still seem to be taboo.
Yes.
When I had my daughter, I've come out of I've had a violent upbringing, and not necessarily, and when I say violent, my dad was a soldier. And so, as a little girl, I would hear things like, soldiers stand still. When he's trying to just tell me to, stop or whatever.
Chill out.
And the way that he spoke was very, very aggressive. He didn't mean to, but he's one of those just soldier by nature, And I will always remember my friends coming into the car once, and they went, oh my gosh, if I lived with you, I'd be crying all the time. And I went, nah man, he don't mean anything by it. And my language and everything I found was very violent. And so, I had to do a lot of counseling, because when Jessie was born, she used to cry a lot. Every time she was around my family, she would just cry. And I went, well, what's going on? Because for her, we lived alone, and I never shouted. I never spoke to her in a manner, that was rough. So when we went into family gatherings, it was a little bit different. because for her it was like, this is just not something I'm used to.
Do it. But the fact of the matter is that we have difficulties. And so hopefully on your show today, we could talk about how do we access help? How do we make it okay for someone else to ask for help? Like, what are the things that we need to do? But the first thing is the stumbling block. This idea that if I acknowledge I need help, that something's wrong with me. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe the fact of the matter is that
Well, we're all a little bit crazy, you know, but you know, it's funny, right? You know, what's so funny is that if my blood sugar level is really high and I don't go to the doctor, people watch us like we're crazy, like you need to go and get help.
Or we spend money on the gym. We spend an enormous money going to the gym.
Anything physical.
And it's so funny,
Or if we don't go to church, then how do you expect your spiritual side to be healthy if you don't go somewhere, if you don't have a spiritual leader? So everyone else agrees with the body and the soul.
Yes.
You must have a leader, you must have a professional, you must have help, except for the mind part.
Well, and we don't understand how they link. So I was talking to an instructor at the gym recently, and he was saying that, you know, I can always tell the people that have things going on, they push themselves too hard. It comes out in terms of how they're taking care of their body. Same thing with your spiritual practice. And I think your spiritual practice may not necessarily be in a church. For some people it is in a church, in a masjid, in a temple. But it is whatever you do that connects you to something bigger than yourself. Those things kind of keep you grounded. And it is a practice. It's not something that you attend and say, hi, I'm here. But it's something that you do. Like when we go to the gym and just say, hey, well, I reach now. It must be okay. You know, I have to
do it.
It is a lifestyle. And I think wellness has to be a lifestyle. There's a way in which we need to really value our mental health or emotional well-being and deal with shame, because we can't talk about stigma without talking about shame. And shame is that inherent feeling that we're unworthy and not good enough. It's not good enoughness. And a lot of times we want to acknowledge that.
So I'm gonna let Stephanie jump in here.
I'm gonna add in just a little bit. I think that the shame also comes with the stigma of, I don't want to call it what the old people say, but in a way they tell you, you know, suck it up, do what you have to do, and move on with yourself. And then you start to think, okay, well, if I can't quite move on with myself, then something is wrong. And it goes straight back to what you were saying about the shame. You know, and we're taught this growing up, especially in our culture. We're taught more and more that this is what we should be doing, and not, if we're not doing it, then not something's wrong. No, something is wrong with you. You have to suck it up and move on. You know, go and do what you have to do.
Yeah, we have a real suck it up mentality. Again, when coming to only mine.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to always, I mean, throughout the conversation, and I'm going to keep going back to comparing it to, you know, like diabetes versus some mental illness. You know, my dad somehow can't seem to eat properly. So he has diabetes, just lost some toes, and I'm told you have to love him through it.
Yeah.
You know, I want to suck it up and just stop eating sugar, but I'm told you have to help him through it. You have to support him, you have to love him. Yet, when someone's going through a mental issue, we go, toughen it up, she weak. Why do we have such a capacity for empathy with physical things, but when it comes to the mental health and the mental illness, we seem to have lost all empathy and we have no capacity to understand and to support?
I think it has to do with fear. It has to do with the fact that I will be labeled. Because I'm hearing how strongly you feel about the fact that we're able to speak up about our physical health. But a lot of people aren't. That there is that shame. I've known a number of people who've lost their legs because this leg now defines me. And how am I going to cope without it? Again, the emotional and your mental well-being.
Because back to the mental.
So it's just the fact that these things are so connected, and if your wellness is not happening in all of your dimensions, something is going on. So we're talking about postpartum depression today, and there's a lot of coulda, shoulda, you should do this, a mother should be this, you should do that. And a lot of times we find ourselves in trouble because our internal state, how we feel, doesn't align with what you should do. And then how do I speak up and say that this is how I feel, that I really want to take this child and shake her, that there is, as Indrani says, this monster in my belly. And I want to link it to something that you said. You said, growing up there was a language of violence. You knew it, you understood it, but it was that language of violence. And how our parents speak to us then becomes our internal voice. And sometimes if we're not aware, we repeat that language of violence and we repeat it to ourselves. So when how I feel is not congruent with what I should feel, I'm told that I should feel, I oftentimes turn that language of violence on myself. So I say something like, I can't believe you're behaving like this, Tracy. Come on. You have to love this child. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? So part of the stigma is that we haven't normalized the fact that some of us struggle differently, and what you're feeling is legitimate. Like, I feel really passionately. We like to label good and bad feelings. There's no such thing as good or bad feelings. They're feelings. And we cannot avoid the experience of a feeling. We can't say, oh my gosh, look, it's anger. Duck it. That way. That feeling comes from within us. Therefore, it is something that we have to manage. And then we need to differentiate our feelings from our behavior. How we think, how we speak, how we act. So we have this feeling that we're feeling that's natural, but we're talking to ourselves negatively about it because it's not matching up with how we're told that we should feel. So therefore, something is wrong with me. So now, not only do I need to seek help, but I need to go and sit down and tell somebody else that something's wrong with me. So maybe some of our problem is in that idea that something can't be wrong with me.
Well,
that I must be perfect.
Because we all work towards perfection, right?
Yeah.
Practice makes perfect. Nobody.
Practice
don't make perfect.
Perfection does not exist.
Yes, it doesn't exist. Exactly.
And sometimes perfection becomes the enemy of good enough. Like sometimes we can do things and we have to be okay with that. And there's a difference between striving for excellence and perfection. So striving for excellence is when I continuously try to do my best, but understanding that my best varies. My best on a Monday doesn't always match my best on a Wednesday.
Absolutely.
Yeah? And that's okay. So it's linked to self-acceptance. Yeah?
We're going to take a break. When we come back, Tracy's going to define postpartum depression for us, and we're going to really get into now the postpartum depression. And I want to discuss the difference between postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis, because there is a clear difference, and I think a lot of people don't get that. Don't go anywhere. It's all about mental illness, Suicide Awareness Month, and postpartum depression today on Care. It's always so funny during the break time. I'm sure my guests are going like, oh my gosh, is this what goes on?
It's an interesting place.
It's an interesting place, yes. If you're just joining us today, it's all about postpartum depression, mental illness, Suicide Awareness Month. We're about to get right into what is postpartum depression. So Tracy, define it for us.
So postpartum depression affects 10 to 15% of all women who are pregnant, who deliver a child. And it's really very much linked, very much connected to what we know about depression. So it's a mood disorder, and it definitely impacts how we feel, and therefore really inhibits how we are able to behave and connect with other people. So, you talked about differentiating postpartum depression from postpartum psychosis. And I want to throw in another one there, which is baby blues. We all hear about the baby blues, right? So the baby blues, it's that irritability that we see in new mothers. Imagine that it's like you've had this present that you've been waiting to open for months and months, and now it's here. there's some adjustment that goes with that. So a lot of women have baby blues. We feel that irritability. We need a little bit of support. We might feel overwhelmed. And that is not necessarily postpartum depression. Yeah? Postpartum psychosis, when we're talking about psychosis, we're talking about a blurring, a disconnection with reality. So it's something that's very severe. Now, both postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis will merit a psychiatric diagnosis. And so we need to be clear about the different people that we have working in the field. So a psychiatrist is a medical doctor who will be able to diagnose and give this diagnosis and also prescribe medication. Now, for psychiatrists, and I'm not a psychiatrist, for psychiatrists, really sometimes the point at which they will use medication are when thoughts become urges. When I'm having the thinking that I want to end this, I don't want to be here, this child is a bother, what is this child about? When those thoughts become urges that I have to do something, they would prescribe medication in order for us to, for your neurological, your physiology to get adjusted. Because again, we talk about the fact that we're physical human beings and this has a biological element. So when we talk about postpartum, we're not just talking about biological, we're talking about cultural, and we talk about all the risk factors and how they interplay. So really, really important, if we're dealing with severe depression, and we know some of the signs of depression might be changes in appetite, unable to connect with the child. It's when things that people find cute, like the smell of the child, makes the mother feel disgusted or repulsed by. Now just think about the guilt that you must feel in addition to the repulsion. Like this is your natural feeling that's coming up, but now you're feeling so guilty because you're having this. You're having this reaction. So all of that really complicates this matter. So really important. So if it is a case of this severe treatment, it's not baby blues, but going to a psychiatrist, finding out what's going on is important. Now a psychologist, a clinical social worker, a psychotherapist, they will be able to work with you. Sometimes we start working with those professionals and those professionals are able to tell, wait, this is something that needs medical, because there's only so much that you can do with, like I could work with you in processing your emotions and understanding where your ledge is and when you feel you might go over the ledge. But when it comes to I'm having the thoughts are there, those thoughts are becoming urges, that needs some sort of psychiatric intervention. And from time we say psychiatric intervention or psychiatry, people get a little tense because this must mean that you're crazy.
Well, yeah, they say St. Anne's one time, and you know.
But we need to understand, again, it's about wellness. It's about this being what you need to regulate yourself. And so counseling works hand in hand with your medication. Yeah, so not everyone will need medication. Some people can work through it, but for some people they need medication. But you always, if you're on medication, you also need to process the emotions. Because we'll get you physiologically, we'll get you thinking and at a stable point, but you need to get that professional intervention. Yeah?
Okay, talk to me about some of the risk factors.
Yeah, so some of the risk factors. So there's some biological risk factors. And when I give these factors out, I want to be careful because we have become this self-help culture that feels that we could Google everything, diagnose ourselves, and then be saved. So I'm giving you...
That's so, you know, in one of my Facebook posts, I actually said, you know, the worst thing that can come out of this whole awareness month and whatnot is that everyone starts to go, oh wait, you have PPD, you have PPD, you have PPD. And worse than that is that everyone who has PPD gonna commit suicide.
Yes.
Because we've not understood that, as you say, baby blues, postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis, it's, you know, it's actually a
continuum.
A continuum, you know.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that because I have postpartum depression, I've reached to the stage where I'm going to be suicidal. You know, that is actually a continuum. And you know, as you say, you know, giving the information, and we don't want everybody to become all self-help, like I'm a doctor.
Yes.
You know,
so I'm going to talk to you
awareness
about some of the risk factors, and you are not to go out and say, oh my gosh, you've met these risk factors. I want you to think about these as some of the things that we look for. And again, we will need a professional, a psychiatrist, a clinical social worker, a psychologist, someone with additional training. And ultimately the diagnosis, when we come to things as postpartum depression and definitely postpartum psychosis, which is looking at that split from reality. That's why a psychosis is, I'm no longer in touch with reality. So, and that is a very extreme form that might include hallucinations and delusions. That is a psychiatric diagnosis, and psychiatrists make those diagnoses. I want to be really clear. But some of the biological risk factors could be prenatal anxiety. Not saying that everyone who has prenatal anxiety, and by prenatal anxiety I mean that worry during the pregnancy. I'm not saying that everybody who has that will develop PPD. Previous history, a history of depression, means that you might be increased, is a risk factor. A history of very bad PMS, premenstrual syndrome, can possibly be. Definitely a history of PPD. If you've had postpartum depression before, these things increase your risk of developing postpartum depression. There are also some cultural factors that we need to look at. And I want to be careful when I talk about the cultural factors. So for some people, there might be a lot of anxiety that comes up because of the nature of their pregnancy. So we have very strong morals here about premarital pregnancies, or perhaps this is an unwanted pregnancy or unplanned for pregnancy. I'm not saying that because that happens, it means that you're going to have PPD, but those are some of the cultural risk factors. Definitely not being able to get support. So the DSM, which is the diagnostic manual that people use so that we're all on the same page when we make diagnoses, they talk about the symptoms appearing within 4 weeks of delivering a child. For epidemiological studies, those are studies that look at how this happens across time and across different people. They study people up to 3 months, yeah? And again, we want to be wary of baby blues. So sometimes because of the nature of your pregnancy, you may be feeling, like I remember a friend of mine telling me that when she became pregnant, she said this child was a parasite. She felt that from the very first day, and she was so severely ill during it. And she was worried about what will happen when this baby came out, and then she did not have a safe space to say to anybody, this child I know this is supposed to be a bundle of joy, but this feels like a parasite that is sucking the living daylight out of me. So I'm not saying having those thoughts would lead, but those are some of the cultural risk factors that we could look at. So shame and taboo, all of these things wear on us emotionally. And that combined with some of the biological risk factors could certainly increase the likelihood of postpartum depression happening.
What about general environment? So for instance, you know, sometimes it may be that, okay, well, we're actually having renovations done in the middle of my pregnancy, in the middle of me giving birth, you know, because anybody who's ever been through renovations knows that in itself can be some stress. Or my husband's lost a job, you know, just before I've given birth.
Yeah.
You know, so some of the things that are actually going on, or hey, you know, my dad's in the hospital, my dad, you know, might have just died.
Yeah.
Can those things contribute, you know, because it's already at a time when, you know, you're digging deep to deal with other things that are going on, and now here it is, I'm a new mom, I have to wake up every so many hours to breastfeed. You know, as a new mom, you don't get a lot of sleep.
Yeah.
You know, there's natural things that just drain you.
Yeah.
You know, whether you're the best mom, whether you're the most prepared mom, you're already drained, you know, just doing motherly stuff. And now there's the other things that are happening in their environment around you.
So I would say that in combination with some of the other biological risk factors, but going through, I mean, these are some general, and like I will be anxious anytime I'm having renovations, I'm anxious. I'm like, when would they leave my house? So exactly. Those are general anxiety.
Yes, that's, you know, and that's what I mean.
Yeah,
so, I think on a normal day, you might be able to deal with it. It would not have pushed you over the edge, you know, but you know, we're talking about getting to that point where, you know, you're sort of like, I've had enough.
Yeah.
You know?
I think those things are situational things that can push you there. Would it definitely mean that if you go through that, you will develop PPD?
No, it doesn't mean will, because as you say, you know, none of the risk factors mean that it will happen.
Yes.
You know, because in fact, it's funny because when you tick off all of my risk factors. I'm like 100%, you must get this
Ready,
thing,
yeah.
you know, but I didn't.
Yeah.
So, and I can definitely say that, you know, you can possibly tick it all off. But for me, what I think that is important, it certainly is the fact that I was aware, because unless you're aware that you actually tick off 99% of the risk factors, then you can't take precaution. You can't say, you know what, I'm actually at a very high risk of developing postpartum depression, those kinds of things, because you just think, well, everything's hunky-dory until you are aware that I'm actually high risk. So now, let's make sure that you do the counseling. Let's make sure this, let's make sure that, so that I don't even have to wait to develop it and then go, how did I get it?
I think you have to also have, and I'm hearing when you talk, Bash, I'm hearing that you had this kind of internal barometer, this yardstick, and I think that, and we can never underplay the value of self-awareness and the importance of self-awareness. That if you have that internal barometer, if something inside of your natural intuition, your gut is saying something is wrong, I need help, that's something that we definitely want you to
That's because I've
pay
always
to.
believed in mental health.
Yeah.
So for me, I mean, because, and now you see like national teams, right? There's a psychologist attached to a national team.
Yeah.
Because more and more people are understanding that you cannot have mental health, you cannot have physical health without mental health. And so for me, I've always known that if I wanted to be successful, my mind and my space must be there.
And you felt really safe in yourself to do that. So we're talking about resilience, and by resilience, we're talking about that bounce back ability, your ability to bounce back. And so we can't talk about risk factors without talking about protective factors. So there are protective factors that come into play, like perhaps I have the support, perhaps
Hold that thought.
I'm holding
So
that
we're going to
thought.
pay bills. So seeing that we're getting into now protective factors, and poor Stephanie has not told her story yet. She's probably like, yeah, thank God. Yeah. So we're going to get into protective factors when we get back. Don't go anywhere. We're talking about postpartum depression, Suicide Awareness Month, you know, mental illness, mental health. You're watching Care. Hi, welcome to Care. If you're just joining us today, we're raising awareness. It's Suicide Awareness Month. We've, you know, had incidences recently in our country where, you know, the world has lost a phenomenal mother. Mothers have lost daughters to suicide. So we thought it prudent to discuss postpartum depression, mental illness, you know, try to educate the public so that we can end the stigma around it. Before we get back into some of the protective things that we can do, we want to talk to Stephanie for a little bit. Stephanie, thank you so much, because I know how very difficult it is to put your face out there, put your name out there, and to tell stories, but I know that it's going to impact so many people after.
I hope so.
You know, tell us.
As you were saying earlier on, I think that the awareness of mental health is very, very low in this country. People don't understand. There's so many teenagers that go through minor depression, and we see signs of this, and yet nothing is done. I mean, I put little things out there, and I get people coming and speaking to me now saying, you know, Steph, I wish we knew, you know, I feel this way sometimes, I feel that way sometimes. I mean, cousins, friends' children, you know, and they say little things, and you realize that it's not only me. I don't only feel this way. When I was younger, in my teenage, I was diagnosed with endometriosis. And again, no idea what it means. It's just a big word for whatever it is, you know. And he kind of mentioned, you know, sometimes when you get your PMS, you're gonna have these mood swings and whatever, but you'll be okay. You just take the tablets and you'll be fine, and so on and so on. But sometimes I would really be in this hole that I would not understand why I'm feeling this way. And I've gained friendships, I lost friendships to the point where friends would tell me, you're crazy, like 1 minute you're cool, the next minute you're tripping out. I don't really understand. And you think one time maybe it stems back to something that went on at home, or, you know, this and that, and you don't realize that this is really something deep that's happening. And You can't quite figure it out. And it started there, and it started to progress, slowly progress. And little triggers in life, you wouldn't realize that something as simple as anxiety would make that empty feeling even worse. And you reach a state of numbness that you don't want to wake up in the morning and just lie in bed. And you're just feeling sad all the time, and you can't just catch yourself, you know? Come on, wake up, catch yourself, let's go, come on, you have to go do this and you have to do that. And it's not actually that easy when you're in that state of depression. And it took a very personal and a very extreme point of just wanting to swallow pills and not being able to move, to realize that I have a problem. And it's not a problem that you can just say, hey mom, you know, I need help. You don't realize that it's that easy to ask for help because you're so drawn into this hole. And we went on and I got help. And I thought that do a couple months, sort your head out and you're good. You know, but it doesn't always work like that. And again, from hearing other stories and speaking to other people, you realize that sometimes you need different types of support, not necessarily just going to see someone. You need to talk to your family, you need to talk to your friends, someone close to you who may understand that this is not just something you can brush aside. And not that family can't do it, family can absolutely do it, but if they don't see the signs, how are they to know? And I think that was a big thing with I was very good at masking. I was fantastic at masking. You would not know because I would go out and drink and lime and have a good time, and nobody would have any idea that when I go home, I sink myself back into my hole and wait to find another way to mask it, to find another venue to, you know, alcohol, cigarettes, whatever vice, whatever. Everybody has a different way. Some people work out and they drown themselves that if they don't have this perfect body, they'll never be perfect. And they'll work and work and work, and then they go home at night and they look at themselves and they just think this is not working, and they fall into that hole. I've heard that story. They have cutting, you know, burning, all these different symptoms that are gone unnoticed because you hide them. Pull your shirt down, you know, you move on. You put makeup on and you put on your face and you go again. Because again, nothing should be wrong with you. I've had fluctuations in my thyroid as well. We spoke about this, you know. And I never knew all these different factors would, you know, put me more at risk. When I had my daughter, beautiful. Life was good. I thought we're good. We go home, you know, yeah, okay, lack some sleep, whatever. But I could not move. I could not move. I wake up in the morning and just lie down and stare and think. Just want to roll down the stairs or something. You know, you really don't want to have to deal, and you can't deal because it's so dark. And again, you know, you have the old people saying baby blues is baby blues. You just get up and cook some food and wash your clothes and clean the house and you're good. Do what you have to do. Feed the child, change the child, bathe the child, and you think, okay, you know what, let me get back into this routine and I'll be fine. But the more that I found myself getting into the routine is the more that I resented it, and the more that I hated it, and the more that I didn't want to be with it, and everything then came into play. I would push people away. I pushed my parents away, I pushed my in-laws away, I pushed my husband away, I pushed everybody away, and again, I could not understand why, and I reached at such a low point that my therapist said, I went back to therapy, and she said, I think that you need to see a psychiatrist, because I think that this is really, your hormone levels are all over the place. You need to check, we need to stabilize you a little bit so you can cope, because you're not coping right now, and if this continues, we don't know where this will go. And again, stabilizers may not be for everyone, and as you were saying, we're not saying Google it and that's what you have to take and this is what you have to do. No, you have to be told what to take, because again, there's so many different medications that work differently with people, and I've changed several different, you know, pills. They've one worked one way, one worked the other way. One I was putting on weight, one was losing weight. One I would be fine 1 minute and just totally erratic the other minute. One, my anxieties got crazy. I mean, to pack a baby bag, you would think it would be easy, you know, Pampers, wipes, whatever, and you go, no, I am packing a duffel bag. I cannot deal, and it would take me hours to go anywhere, even if it was just to the grocery. And I couldn't understand why. And again, because your moods are up and down, your hormones are all over the place, and you have different triggers. Something may go wrong one day, and all it takes is this one thing to send you straight back down. And it becomes an up and down battle. And without having people to talk to, I was lucky I had help. But it, again, if you don't go continuously and you don't reach a solution or find a means of coping, you can end straight back down, you know. And I don't think it's spoken about enough. When I saw everything on the news, that's why I messaged you. I said, you know, I put a little something out there. So many people have called me, friends and family, that just, and I know a few of them and I've spoken to a few of them in the past, but I just want them and others and the public to know that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to say, I don't know what's going on in my head, but I feel like I need someone else to help me. Even if it's not your friends or family, there are avenues out there that you can go to and just talk and figure it out. Figure out if it's chemically imbalanced, if there are different issues going on with your life that's helping push this to this level. You know, we see teenagers, this happening with teenagers, they still haven't reached the peak in their lives, and it is devastating to know that they couldn't get help. You know, I can't imagine what their parents are going through as a parent now. If my daughter reached this state, how would I feel? But this is the whole point of awareness. This is where you get to see these signs and you get to hear these signs and you get to know that this is reaching a point of, it's not just suck it up and cope. It's a point where, just like you'd go to the doctor, you need to go and see someone and talk. You need to go to a counselor. Yeah, and there's so many of them, as you were saying, there's spiritual counselors, there's therapists, you know. The avenues are there, and I think that we need to know more about it, and we need to not just brush this off to the side and say, suck it up, you'll be okay, because sometimes it doesn't end up okay, and
You're
we
right.
don't want to hear about that.
Exactly.
Stephanie, I want to take a moment and just kind of acknowledge what you have just done. And it's because a lot of times we think courage is something heroic, and it's this grand thing. But courage, and when we go back to the Latin root of the word courage, it means telling your story with your whole heart. And I just kind of want to acknowledge that that's what you did. You came here.
I could bust in tears right now. I'm telling you, this is, you know, it's.
But I want to acknowledge, and I don't want us to move too quickly past that. I want to just acknowledge your courage in telling your story with your whole heart and putting it out there.
You know, I think that we have people in this country who have attempted to commit suicide, and again, this is why this month is a big thing and people don't realize it. There's so many that have tried and have failed.
Yeah.
And they don't know why, and that is the hardest part of not knowing why, you know, why you feel this way and why do you want to reach this point of not wanting to exist. It's a harsh reality to reach, but once you can realize, and I said it somewhere, you know, I have something to live for, and you realize that those little words are tough, that once you can face those words and realize that they are reality, it makes a big difference.
With that, we're going to go on a break. When we get back, you know, Stephanie touched on something, her thyroid being, you know, fluctuating. And I want, because something that I think the public are genuinely not aware of is the physical side of things that actually lead to the mental side of things. You know, because we've been speaking a lot about mental health and needing, you know, the all-encompassing mind, body, and soul. But I think the general cruelty comes from not understanding that sometimes the mental health and the hormone imbalance and everything that seems to just be, okay, you're crazy or you're in a depressed state or whatnot, it actually stems from the physical side of things not being where it should be. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, we're going to talk about the physical imbalances that can cause mental illness. You're watching K. Hi. If you're just joining us, we're talking all about postpartum depression. We've just heard from an incredible young lady who's off to go pick up her incredible kids. So she's left us. Thank you so much to Stephanie. You know, apart from the fact that she came, she told her story, logically, you know, the logistics of it, she had to run right after. She stayed until she could tell her story. So, you know, she's a hero, because without these stories, we really cannot connect. It's sometimes as much information as we give until we hear that someone else is going through it. You know, it takes that one brave soul to step out and say, look, I've gone through it and this is what I have gone through. And that normally brings that support, that little edge that we need to all come forward. I want to touch on the physical side of things, because Stephanie spoke about her thyroid. And in April of this year, I developed a hyperactive thyroid. Again, we don't know, I mean, you can't know about every illness, right? So for me, I was tired, I was cranky. If I go into the living room isn't air conditioned, the heat would just be insane. I would just not want to cook because the kitchen's too hot. And I would just be feeling like hot. And that heat is just bothering me. Cool, because again, we think nothing of it. And I'm just irritable because, well, my dad's in the hospital. So she's just being cranky because her dad's in the hospital. And we were launching care at the same time. So she's just being cranky because of everything that's going on. Thank God for me. What actually started happening was the physical signs also started coming quickly upon the mental signs. Otherwise, I could see, you know, coming from the family for sure that I come from, where it's like, toughen it up. I could see it going a completely different route. So of course, the physical signs started happening, a lot of pain in my jaw. My hand started to, you know, like an old lady, like sort of to make your heart palpitate. And that's when a doctor became involved. And when she got involved, and she said, you have an abnormal thyroid gland. And, you know, past all of that, then to understand that your thyroid controls your emotions, your thyroid, the hormones and everything. And it was simply that I had gone through, I mean, I had the first panic attack that I ever had in life. I had an anxiety attack. I would be in bed. I remember sleeping, coming to do the show and going back home to sleep. You know, like everything, it took everything out of me to come and do. I remember that show. I did the show, went back home, and I slept. Yeah. And the doctor had to explain, you know, the doctor was explaining it throughout the way that, you know, it's not that, you know, you've just suddenly gone crazy or anything like that. And she had to explain that your thyroid gland controls a lot of these emotions. It produces hormones that are necessary to control these things. I mean, and to understand for the first time that it's just physical. It is just something that is not producing something. And it has nothing to do with, well, she's weak or she doesn't have control over her emotions. It was simply something that was not working physically. Once, of course, I started on the right, you know, after they did all the different tests, once they put me on the right thyroid meds, everything was back to normal. Yeah. And I want the public to understand that sometimes it's just a manifestation of something physical that's actually not working. You know? Yeah. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, to a limited extent, because I'm not a medical doctor.
Okay.
I bat in my crease. So I'm not a medical doctor, so I cannot speak to the physiological, what's going on with the body. But we know that there are biological elements to this. There's something we said earlier that I want to clarify because I don't want us to give wrong information. We spoke about baby blues, postpartum depression, and then postpartum psychosis, and I think we use the word continuum, and I want to be careful because continuum kind of suggests that you could graduate from one to the other, and that's not necessarily so.
Okay.
And I also want to say that psychosis is very, very rare. It happens, I read, like 1 to 2 persons in a 1,000 women.
Yeah.
It's very, very rare, and the symptoms often look like what we will call bipolar, with lots of manic episodes and depressive episodes. And again, it is very severe, not something that a lot of people experience. So I can't speak too much about the physical elements, but we know for sure that they're biological elements. But if we can link that to the mental health elements, one of the things that we don't do is speak with ourselves. We don't speak to ourselves with compassion, self-compassion. Like there must be a voice that says, oh my God, I'm feeling horrible, as opposed to something that judges me. There's so many things between how you feel and you getting the help you need. And between that is you and how you speak to yourself and how others speak to you. So there's something that Stephanie said in her story that I want to raise for a lot of people out there who may have somebody going through postpartum depression. Sometimes we say things and maybe we are well-meaning, but those things do not help. You have so much to be grateful for. Why aren't you happy? Look at those 2 beautiful children that you have. You know, what's wrong with you? You're getting up, you have a show, and then you're going home in your bed. Why do you think we need to be worried? Get over yourself. The same thing that you said, suck it up. Sometimes those voices, some of them are well-meaning, but what they do, what it feels like, I've spoken to one person, she said it feels like a dagger. Because then I ask myself, why aren't you grateful? Why can't you just be happy for these 2 beautiful children that you have? And I use that to attack myself. So I'm not asking for help. I'm not talking about the fact that I'm going through this physiological issue, that I'm sleeping all the time. I'm not even going to get to the point where we can realize that this is a thyroid problem, because my self-talk is in my way. It seems as though one of the things that you have, and this links back to the protective factors. We were talking about protective factors before, that if you have those things, you have that. You can be compassionate for yourself. You can be non-judgmental. Sometimes that gets us closer to accessing help. So I want us to think about how do we make a space where people feel open to say, I am on the ledge, where people feel open to say, I think I have a problem. This is really unpleasant, and not be judged.
Okay.
Yeah?
How do we create that space?
Well, first of all, if I feel grateful, I believe in gratitude practice. I have a gratitude practice. Sometimes it's how I get through some really horrible experiences. But it has to be something that I feel. So,
but you just said some people can't feel
that's
that.
why going that way. So really be careful about what you throw on people. Yeah, because you might actually be triggering guilt. And when you trigger that guilt, it is not going to help them. It's some of those things that push us to suicide. Yeah? So some of creating that space is really being non-judgmental. You're having a hard time. I don't know what your experience is. Only you know what your experience is. How can I help? I don't know how we could help. Okay, I'm just going to sit here with you in silence. I'm not going to judge you. Do you think we need to? I don't think I need to go anywhere. Don't go there. Okay, what do you need? So it's repeatedly trying to find ways to reach out.
So when I sit and I say, you know, let's try to focus on all the things that you have to be grateful for, that can actually be damaging someone.
That could be damaging someone.
So how do we know?
Because it comes across as condescending.
It can.
Yeah, you ask. Say, listen, I don't know what it is to be in your life. When I look at your life, it looks as though you have so much going on. How does it feel for you? That's a question. That is not you should feel this way. That opens us up to have a dialogue. That, you know, getting help is about asking for help and about feeling safe to ask for help. And that creates some of that safety to ask for help. Now, there's some people who do all of these things and ultimately they lose someone to suicide. There's no prescription. There's no do this and you would avoid this. We do know that suicide is preventable because it is someone making a deliberate decision to take their life. The solution to dealing with it is on both sides. It's about how do we really nurture resilience in our children, that bounce back. How do we nurture non-judgmental? How do I speak to my child, being aware that my voice is going to become my child's internal voice? I can't tell you the things that I do up to now with all my awareness, and it triggers and I say things that were said to me that I know are unhealthy.
Yeah.
I do it. It's my
Well,
language.
because we're not perfect.
Because we're
We
not
are
perfect.
on a continuous journey of self-development.
And that language of violence is a language that I've learned. And so there are all of these fantastic studies being done in neuropsychology now, looking at how the brain actually reacts under stress. You know, you have a great part of your brain that's just responsible for emotional functions. And sometimes when our brain becomes hijacked by emotion, it's hard for us to locate our language centers or problem-solving centers to become critical about it. So one of the things that happens is that we can have all the great knowledge and we're reading, and so we're learning how to speak to ourselves kindly, but when we're under stress, your old wiring is triggered.
Yes. Yeah.
And so it is, again, that constant practice, that constantly working on getting better.
Okay. Our hour is nearly up.
I was nearly up.
So you have 2 minutes.
I have 2 minutes.
To like stick it to the Caribbean. What would you like to say? You know, what is the last 2 minutes what's the message that you would like to leave with regards to suicide? You have a minute.
I have a minute. That
With
depression.
regards to depression.
Depression is real. And it's a felt experience, and someone can't tell you how to feel that feeling is real. If you are feeling sad, you're feeling the difference going on with your body, reach out for help. If you suspect that somebody that you love is dealing with depression, a new mother, you're seeing that repulsion or disgust at things that should be cute, reach out, ask them if they need help. You know, suicide is preventable. We can only do our best.
I wrote a blog on it. I'm not going to read it out, don't worry. But you can go on to marshariley.com. It is there, and it does give, in a very explainable way, some signs and symptoms that you can look for to help prevent suicide. Guys, it's been great. It's been a bit of a deep topic. I hope that this has helped. Please, get educated, find out, because by the time you do, it'll be too late. You've been watching Care. See you next week.